Okay, first of all, before we go into it, just want a reminder that this is for the very beginner of photography. If you're already into it, you're already shooting away and you know what you're doing, this probably isn't for you. But anyway, so now we're going to talk about the SLR camera, and I've got a bunch of them here. So, I mean, we'll just pick one. Hopefully it's got no film in it. Let's get this one. So, this is an Olympus OM1. What SLR means is that it's a single lens reflex, SLR. And that just means that the image goes into the lens here. It hits a mirror, and it goes shot up into a prism here, and then to your eye in the viewfinder here. So when you're looking through that viewfinder, you are seeing through the lens. So essentially what you see is what you get. There is a slight cropping to that, but it's marginal. Don't need to worry about it. So I mean, I can show you that. If we just take this lens off here. So there's the mirror in there, and if I set this to bulb, wind it on, you should see this mirror flip up, and then when I release, it'll flip back down again. Hopefully you can see that. Yeah, so that's the basics of why it's an SLR and not something else. We'll go over the other cameras in other videos. But yeah, the SLR. So main controls. It's pretty standard. You know, most cameras are the same unless they have, you know, auto features. Starting from the left here, we've got the film winder. So that's for winding your film. Here is the switch for the light meter. Not every camera has this. Not every photographer needs it. It's just a preference. Here on this camera we have the shutter speeds on a ring at the base of where the lens mount is. So that chooses your shutter speeds. Then here we've got the ISO setting wheel, or the ASA on this camera because it's quite old, but we'll talk about that another time. So that's your ISO setting, and then you've got your shutter button and your crank, your cocking mechanism. For that will wind the film on and cock the shutter, ready for you to take a shot. And then aperture is on the lens usually. If we're talking digital, then sometimes you'll have it on the body as well, but typically it's on the lens. Yeah, and that's the basics of a an SLR camera. And here, usually, if you pull these, the door opens, and that's where you put your film in here, you pull it across. You have to slot it into the little slot there. We'll go over this in detail another time. And then you'll be loaded, ready to go. So that's the OM1, a really good, fully mechanical, SLR camera. Now the light meter does require a battery. These ones take an old type of battery, but usually it's an LR44. That's these little ones here, just the little LR44 batteries. Pretty cheap actually. You can get like a pack of 10 for £6 or something on Amazon. Yeah, so what's good about this particular one is it doesn't need the battery to operate the shutter. Everything's mechanical, so I don't use the light meter in the camera, so I don't ever put a battery in it, and it works all the time. And as long as you keep it in good condition, it will never fail you, hopefully. So that's the OM1. We've got the consumer version of that, which is the OM10. And it's all pretty much the same. All the same controls. They're in slightly different locations, but they're all the same. So we've got our aperture on the lens here. The shutter speeds this time are on this little dial at the front of the camera. And they're all the same shutter speeds as on the OM1. Here you've got your light meter switch there, you've got your film winder, We've got our ISO setting ring here, and again, checking I've got no film in there. We've got the lever for cocking the shutter, and we've got the shutter button. And it's this really great camera, really good. And I'll come back to this in a sec. Here's a couple of others. It's a really old Soviet era camera, I think. The Petri TTL. Same thing. You look in there, you're seeing what's coming through the lens. Yeah, pretty standard stuff. All the controls are there. Again, slightly different locations. This is the camera I use in the studio. A Chinon CM3. I use it in the studio just because I can get really good lenses for it. That's the only reason. But yeah, this one has a slightly different feature in that it has a locking mechanism here. So if I cock the shutter and lock it, I can't accidentally fire the shutter, which is pretty good, quite handy. If you've wound on and then you didn't want to take the photo, it's quite handy to have that lock. But yeah, so you just slide that over and then you can take a picture again. Everything the same. Yeah, good camera. So they're all fully manual, which means you have to do everything yourself. They don't do anything for you. There are some exceptions, and I'll come back to that. This one is not fully manual. This is a Minolta X300. This is an aperture priority camera. Sorry, aperture. I was right the first time. Aperture priority camera. So what that means is you set the aperture on the lens, and then the camera will set the shutter speed for you. You don't get to choose. You might wonder, well, what's the use in that? Well, it's pretty handy actually, because you can say, oh, okay, well, I want to be at this aperture all day long, or in the studio for the whole shoot, and the camera will just keep it there. As long as you're aware that sometimes it might choose a slow shutter speed, or a fast shutter speed when you don't want one, that's fine. By the way, if none of this is making sense yet, don't worry, I'll get to what shutter speed and aperture and ISO all means in later videos. This is a handy camera though, because it has an on and off, so the battery isn't getting wasted, which is really, really good. So when it's off, I can wind it and it won't take a shot. I have to turn it on and then it will take a shot. Again, needs batteries because that's an electronic mechanism. Yeah. So on the subject of aperture priority, if we go back to the OM10, the consumer version of the OM1, this shutter speed dial can come off. And if you do that, then it's an aperture priority camera. And it's great. These cameras are really, really good. And I should mention that these are all pretty cheap, really. This OM10 I think I got for around £15. I got this X300 for about a tenner. I mean, you're talking dirt cheap money here. You can get into film photography for next to nothing. Obviously, film costs a lot, but the camera's pretty cheap. This CM3 I think maybe £20, and it came with a lens. Yeah, and this Petri was like £7 from a house clearance, and it came with a legendary Helios 44 lens. These lenses are really beautiful lenses. One of these was actually rehoused in a bigger lens barrel and used to shoot the Batman movie with Robert Pattinson. So really good lens, and it came with a £7 camera. Didn't have to pay anything extra for it. So that's kind of an introduction to SLRs. We'll go into the controls a little bit more and what they all mean in other videos, but that's your basics. So hopefully that helps. And I would advise choosing any one of these, but if I was really pushing you to buy a particular one, I would go for anything from the Olympus OM series. The OM1, like I said, will work mechanically forever if you look after it. And the OM10, I've got like 6 of these, I think. I use them to teach with. They're brilliant cameras. And this was my professional camera for a long time before I got the OM1. So there's nothing wrong with these at all. Yeah, that's my advice. Yeah, so next time I'm going to talk about rangefinder cameras. But that's it for now. Thanks.